Next item.
Under Finance, none submitted. Miscellaneous, Superintendent's report.
Dr. Thompson?
As Dr. Irving and Dr. Geeson are coming to the podium, to the chairs here, I just wanted to remind our community that this is, again, ongoing conversations and reports back to the Board of Education as was directed by the board president and board members. And so tonight, we will be talking about professional learning. If you recall I will revisit the last board meeting, we talked about guidelines, knowing that that was an example of some of the guidelines that we would be looking at. However, as you were made aware, there are others that we are working on, and we'll be sharing those towards the end as we get closer to being able to work on policy. We'll bring back more guidelines. And so tonight, we're gonna give you just a little bit of a taste of what is happening with professional learning.
All right.
So the two good doctors, it's on you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Thompson, and President Logan, and other board members. And so, as Dr. Thompson stated, we are here to describe to you what professional learning currently is in place in the district that supports creating positive culture and a safe learning environment for our students while we think about the whole child. And so, just as we get started, I just want to explain that when we talk about professional learning, it is a pretty large umbrella. It encompasses not only professional development or trainings that we do, we're also, going back to the data, professional learning is how we're using that data to make those decisions, as well as what other supports are in place to support our staffs. So tonight's presentation will describe professional learning that is in place currently, that supports the whole child, that we are being intentional in implementing because it helps build trust and safety within our schools. And of course, everything all ties into we are investing in staff. So to begin, we have done a significant amount of training with our leaders and some school staff around being trauma informed. It's about building healthy relationships with our students so we get to know who they are and how their experiences, as well as those stressors that they may have, impact their academic and behavior success, as well as their social success. That's a tongue twister there. Knowing and understanding who the students are sitting in our classrooms helps us be able to respond in ways to best support them. Also, we have restorative practices, and our secondary school staff received, or secondary school leaders received initial training, and as well as their staffs have received initial training. Those secondary administrators now have been fully trained and implementing it within our secondary schools. Some of the restorative practices guideline principles include relationships are key in building an inclusive community. There's an emphasis on repairing the harm done to others and restoring relationships. Affective statements teaches empathy and allows students to have a voice in expressing their feelings. And restorative practices empowers change and growth.
As we describe some of the additional programs and things happening in the district, you're going to hear common descriptions from one program to another, and you'll think, oh, I just heard that. We just talked about that one was about building relationships, or that one was about fostering empathy. And when we start to see those themes repeating, that is when we know we have alignment with certain programs. So we are hitting the mark in several arenas. A social-emotional character development program we have in place is Second Step, and that is curriculum that is designed for 4 to 14-year-olds. Each grade level has curriculum that is designed for that grade level. That, too, is about building relationships and learning about empathy, learning about good decision-making, and some self-reflection. Additionally, we have suicide awareness and prevention, and while this has been mandated as annual trainings from our state, the district has done a fantastic job of creating very professional and presentations that are engaging and high quality. And so it's not just skimming the surface. These presentations are thoughtful. Like I said, they're high quality, and they are taken very seriously. And having participated in the district's training, compared to others I've seen, I definitely felt that this was just an in-depth look at what resources we can provide teachers. So additionally, from what the district receives from the state, there are resources made available, and then our district also shares resources out, as well as having things available on the website. Capturing Kids' Hearts is a relationship building model, and so while we have instructional models and we have curriculum models, we're fortunate in our district to have a relationship building model. And so this model encourages teaching adults how to build relationships with students, being very specific about starting those relationships. And again, it is acknowledging children's backgrounds and their culture, acknowledging what they come to school with every day so that we understand the children in front of us, and encouraging empathy and building classroom community. And you'll hear classroom community come up in a variety of programs as well. Biography-driven instruction is also about acknowledging, validating, understanding the children that are in front of us, their sociocultural backgrounds, building that into the academic learning and creating learning connections, and ultimately fostering high rigor for students and tapping into how children learn best. Human growth and development. We have a committee that addresses the human growth and development list of topics. That committee meets regularly throughout the year to evaluate and assess the curriculum there. That curriculum covers a wide variety of topics at different grade levels, where parents may choose to opt their children into courses, but some of the topics include physical, emotional, and social changes, healthy friendships, self-esteem, and those rather broad topics. Culturally relevant teaching, again, is about some self-examination on the part of the adult, and how we also learn to validate the backgrounds of the children coming to class, in front of us. And we have had a system in place for training staff in CRT, for short, and we look to consider how we might be able to grow that. That is a program that through that self-examination process, that a teacher is able to promote rigor and making relevant connections as well to a child's background and the content of subject matter in the classroom.
So in addition to those types of trainings that are geared towards looking at the whole child, we also have some specific type of things that are in place that help promote a safe, healthy learning environment. One of them is Stoic. And so what we know is that it's critical that we have structures within our schools to create that safe environment. Safe and our students feeling safe don't happen by chance. And so it's important that we have training for our staff on how to create that type of culture. So Stoic is an acronym. It stands for S, Structure for Success. And with this piece of it, we examine what our physical arrangements look like in our classrooms. We also look at what our hallway procedures look like and our bathroom routines look like and those other places where students are at in our buildings, and identifying, have we set that structure up for our students to be successful? T stands for teaching those expectations. And that when we teach, it is much like when we teach academics, when we teach numeracy and math and other contents, that we also have to teach what we expect in our behavior of our students, and doing that explicitly. We also learn through Stoic that we really shouldn't have more than 3 to 6 positively stated rules. And positively stated is the key in that piece. We also must be consistent in our expectations of those rules, because we know that if we're not consistent, then it is hard for our students to know what that target is of what we are needing and expecting of them. We also know that trust is developed between our students and staff when our students can count on us being consistent in what our expectations are of them. O stands for observing and supervising. And so with that, our staff must be actively engaged to monitor those behaviors and be consistent in praising those behaviors that we want to reinforce in our students, and also holding students accountable for those things that are not appropriate. I tells us to interact positively with our students, and so this is the key in building those healthy, positive relationships. 3 to 1 and 5 to 1 are actually what we call positive to correction ratios. So for every corrective statement we give a student, we should be very intentional and purposeful, and also providing at minimum 3 to 5 positive statements. And as educators, as we monitor what our positive to correction statements, it also is telling students that, yes, I'm holding you accountable, but I'm doing it because I care about you. And so that's what's important. And then lastly, we learn through Stoic C, which is correcting calmly and consistent. And the key in this is with dignity and respect. So even if a student misbehaves, as the adults, it is still important for us to treat them with that dignity and respect. School assemblies occur throughout the year so that staff can review expectations and those guidelines for success. Guidelines for success are social skills and character skills that each school promotes and teaches, because we know that those guidelines for success are going to help our students be successful not only in the classroom, they're good for life. And so we're teaching them and preparing them for those character and those soft skills and those life skills that are going to carry on and help them be successful long after they leave our classrooms and our schools. Annual trainings occur with staff and students on bullying and harassment, awareness, and prevention. The Safety Services Department page on our district's website contains several resources for our families and students to access to learn more about what bully and harassment awareness is, and resources to be able to support their student. One resource to create safe schools in our schools is the Speak Up program, which allows our students, our staff, family, and even the community the ability to make anonymous tips. And so they can access how to do that on our district website. Information on those safety tips then are carried out and followed up on. Also, our Run, Hide, Fight training is another safety training that has been nationally recognized and supported by many governmental agencies. The Kansas Safe and Prepared Schools, U.S. Department of Ed, U.S. Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, to name just a few. And so this, again, is another annual training for staff and students. Each fall, during our back-to-school trainings, there is a mandatory review of the non-discrimination statement, because we know it's important that all staff understand what that statement is and what it means for us as a district. So, as you can see, beyond all the academic and instruction trainings that we have in place within the district, there are many other types of training, supports, and professional learning that are occurring that helps us create a positive, healthy learning environment. We will continue to work on implementing all of those that we've described this evening, but other things that are also happening related to professional learning is HR workshops for our leaders. Those workshops are on a variety of topics that empowers our leaders to create and lead safe schools. Soon, like in the next couple days and weeks, our climate surveys will be completed by our families, our staff, and students. These questions on the survey provide us important data on perceptions, if our schools are safe and trusting places. It also provides feedback on the effectiveness of our communication and building healthy relationships. And so this data will be analyzed at the building level as well as the district level to help us celebrate those areas that those stakeholders tell us we're doing well, but also to begin to problem solve around any areas of focus or concern. This past summer, we had a team of staff from the Departments of Equity and Diversity, Learning Services, and HR that started meeting to research professional development that other districts have in place to address equity and inclusiveness. And so now that we've talked to the Council of Great City Schools, which was a great resource, but also other districts that have some great things in place. Where we're at now is actually having conversations with those district leaders on the programming that they've adopted for their districts and what implementation looked like. You know, it's always nice to hear those lessons learned from others, so that when we start working on our multi-year plan, it's been well thought out and that it is set up to be supportive and successful for all of our staff. So next, as I mentioned, we are talking to district leaders who have implemented equity and inclusiveness plans, and we will begin to design a multi-year plan for us within our district. Our plan will address race, social class, gender, sexual orientation, and disabilities. And so this plan is going to be a multi-year plan because we know that we must be intentional in providing high-quality professional development along with all of our other curriculum and instruction and policy and behavior pieces. And so we need to be intentional on how we get all of those things in so that it's not just a one hit and miss, but it's truly set up so that it helps us be more effective in our work. If you go back to the first slide, what we said in professional learning should help us as educators become more effective in how we support the academic, social well-being of our students. So one of the themes, as Dr. Geeson has mentioned, that we have found through our own current cultural trainings, as well as what we have heard from other districts, is the theme of relationships. Knowing and understanding who the students are sitting before us and being able to respect them and support them and build those trusting relationships with them. So we feel pretty good that we have some things in place that are helping our staff and students build stronger relationships, as well as students to build stronger relationships. But we also look forward to coming back and sharing with you our plans related to our equity and inclusiveness multi-year plan as soon as it is completed. So, questions that you might have?
Yes, we do have some. Ernestine. How and in what circumstances, I know that there must be several, 3 or 4 or 5, do you present these professional learning opportunities to teachers? Are they generally in a large auditorium? Are they within a school so that the the faculty chooses that that's going to be what happens on a particular in-service day? Do individuals go somewhere? How do you present this professional learning to teachers throughout this whole thing that you've talked about?
It's all of the above.
Okay.
And
I suspected that, but you hadn't
Yes.
said anything, so I thought I would.
It is. And so I'll let Dr. Geeson expand upon this, but we offer everything from district-level trainings on in-service days, and there are a few of them that we have the opportunity to do that, to things that we create and package that leaders can then go back and present at their buildings during staff meetings and built-in professional development. But it is quite the endeavor to pull off district-wide in-service when you consider the number of staff that we have, and even just logistically, the facilities to be able to pull that off. So there are some things that are presented district-wide, and there are some things that are presented at the building level. I will say that when there are things that are even presented at the building level, that we want to ensure that everyone receives the exact same message, we do that in a variety of ways. Sometimes we create videos where there's someone telling, and so we know that we say on this particular in-service day that this is something that we need delivered for everyone. If it's not a video, if it is a PowerPoint and other handouts, we even write the script. And we tell staff or those leaders that are going to be presenting, we want you to read the script word by word, because we want to ensure whether you're at building A or building B, that everyone receives the exact same message during that in-service. So it's done a variety of ways, and I rambled there.
No,
But do you
you're
have
good.
something
No,
else
you're
to add
good.
to that?
I will add to that. So August 6th, District In-Service Day is a real good example, and it kind of depends on the intention of the training as well, but that day we had elementary folks stay at their own buildings and receive a webinar, an interactive webinar. So we were able to interact with all of the elementary staff, teachers, principals in their buildings, but the important piece of that was that they were intact as a team at the building level so they could collaborate around that interactive webinar. So we need to be a little bit creative with our technology. Nothing beats face-to-face, but we have to get creative. One of our most effective things that's been happening lately is, and especially with SRG, is, as an example, is curriculum folks are literally going out to buildings to give some targeted professional learning in maybe some smaller groups. So that can't happen all of the time, and certainly not to the degree that we would like. And even we were brainstorming today about how we can get more creative with that service as well, getting way more targeted for folks.
Following up on that, I remember years ago, one of the most important use of the video or the webinar is to be able to show teachers modeling of the right way and modeling of the wrong way. And I could see that could be something, that our district could create those and have them available, and even have it so that an individual teacher could access that on her own, that we don't have to have everything learned in a big mass group, but the modeling thing, so it's not just, and you're both good teachers, so that's what we need to do. But I know that an awful lot of people, they're saying, well, I don't know what I say that's not friendly. Let's have some modeling of how the teacher approaches the child that's just had the trauma, and what's the appropriate kinds of interactions there. I really think teachers really will appreciate being able to, oh, yeah, that's how it is. So.
And along those lines, it also is contingent on the topic.
Right.
There are some topics that could be delivered in a large group setting and received well.
That's right.
There are some topics that really, because of the topics, we should have smaller groups so that those participants, sometimes they have trust with one another. And so we just have to also weigh what the topic is and then identify what would be the best way to be able to support our adult learners with that professional learning as well.
Ron? I was just wanting to find out information on restorative practices. How is that, how does it come about? What's the process? Is the student referred to by teachers, and then is the group made up of counselors, teachers, administrators? I'm still not quite clear on how that looks.
And so we're just starting some things really at the elementary, and so I'm going to talk more of secondary. So our building administrators have all been trained with restorative practices, and then they've been fully trained. And then our staff at the secondary have received initial trainings. And so what has happened at the secondary level is our APs really have embraced and taken the lead with that. And so it looks different, because what we want is for the staff to really feel comfortable and confident in being able to have those circles, those conversations with students, to be able to lead that. And so I was at a high school today, and the AP was saying that he was doing that. I was at another school, it was a middle school today, and it was members from the child study team that were helping lead that. So everyone is trained, but it looks a little different on who is taking the lead in having those conversations. As far as referral, it could be a classroom teacher, but it could be another staff member in the building that is making that recommendation on a student sitting down. Again, what we really want is for students, well, I'll go back to at a building that it was at today, and the AP was talking about, some folks may think that this is letting kids off and easy. He said, for the kids that I'm sitting down with and having these restorative conversations with, this is so much harder, and them having to articulate and process and reflect on the harm that they've done someone else, and the opportunity for the victim to be able to articulate what you've done to me and how this makes me feel has just been powerful.
So there's no, or it doesn't have to be a referral written. I mean, the whole purpose, I guess, is to reduce referrals. Is that right?
It is. It's proactive, and again, it's building students who are empathetic, but also learn from the choices that they are making, and hope that they don't repeat some of those same behaviors and actions.
It's pushing thinking,
Right,
thinking
right,
and
yeah.
processing on children, and the teachers, the adults are trained in the process of doing that, which is no small feat, and it's a lot of work, and it's intense, and it's for the period of time that you're carrying it out, it's hard work
Right.
for both parties. But it's, we're an education agency first, so it's our opportunity to teach you through this process of thinking about your behavior, your actions, consequences, relating with other students, and so on.
Right. So I think some people might think that it's like getting off, but is there follow-up? I guess if if the student wasn't followed up with, then some people might think, okay, they're just getting off because nobody ever followed up with anything afterwards. Is there any follow-up?
Most definitely, and
Okay.
even through a restorative conversation does not mean that there aren't consequences for behaviors. It just means, in addition, what we're doing is teaching you how your actions and behaviors impact others.
Right.
So it's not just about, I'm going to take down this hammer and, and nail you for it. We're going to hold you accountable, but we're going to teach you some things about life skills so that this behavior doesn't become a pattern.
Right. Just one last thing, I'm sorry. On the capturing kids' hearts, is that in specific schools or primary or secondary?
I would have to defer to the colleagues in the back for more specifics.
So it is just a few select schools that have implemented capturing kids' hearts. One of them is our redesigned school, Chester Lewis, and then there is one other middle school? Two.
Thank you.
Thank you. That answered part of my questions. Because I think, and please correct me if I am incorrect, but all the things that you listed, with the exception of the things that are on page 3, which is capturing kids' hearts, biography-driven instruction, those two pieces in particular, those two pieces are not district-wide, but the rest of them are. Is that a correct statement?
Most. Something else that is not district-wide would be our CRT, which is the culturally relevant
Okay.
teaching.
That same page. Mhm.
Yes.
So the human growth and development is district-wide, but those other 3 programs are just in specific schools now.
Correct.
And are we evaluating to see if we want to continue that and expand it, or will it always remain just in the schools that choose to have it?
So we are doing just that. We are looking at those particular programs, but also looking at other programs we have in place and those that we're researching to determine what is it that we need to implement district-wide so that everyone is receiving it and that it supports our plans for bringing in equity and inclusiveness and belonging.
Yeah, because I know Lewis is one of my assigned schools, and I was out there just after they'd had this training. They were extremely excited about it and how they felt like it was going to change the culture in their building. My next question is really, you listed right at the end of your presentation some things that we were looking at in professional development, and one was race, social class. Could you please read that list off again for me?
Okay, so what we started doing this past summer is we reached out to the Council of Great City Schools. They're a great resource to be able to help us identify some school districts that are already implementing some things that we are wanting to consider. And so that was one of the first steps that took place, as well as there was some listening sessions that our director in our equity and diversity department did, Mr. Will Polite. And so he met with some community folks and some internal folks to also get some feedback on what they see as strengths within our diversity trainings and supports, overall professional learning, but also what might be some areas that we are lacking. So that's another data point that we looked at. And so with what we've heard from what he was able to gather at the listening sessions, with what we heard from the Council of Great City Schools, with what we are also learning through equity audits within the district, we see these great things going on in pockets, and so that's why we need to look at what is already happening so we can see if it's something that we might want to consider expanding district-wide, but also how do we use that information with our professional development multi-year plan. So what we are looking specifically at and adding to a inclusiveness and belonging plan are topics and issues related to race, social class, gender, sexual orientation, and disabilities. And again, each of these topics have come out either, like I said, from the listening session, but also from what we've learned from other districts. And so there are conversations happening right now with district leaders from across the nation who have already adopted programs and trainings to be able to support their staff. So we're trying to learn from them as well as get some recommendations of different programs that they've used. And then this group that has been meeting, which I said is folks from our equity and diversity office, I almost forgot the name of the office, Equity and Diversity Office, Human Resources and Learning Services. And so there are staff members from each of those departments meeting, and they will be taking all of these recommendations, taking the data that we have, and working on that multi-year plan.
And then, because several of those things are things that we've heard from our community that we aren't as strong in as we may need to be. And so will the board then get some kind of a report or information back about what your team has found?
Most definitely. And so our plan would be, when that is completed, to come back here and share with you what we have found and what the multi-year plan would look like, and how we would be able to support our staff with the professional development, but ongoing support. Because again, we're not looking for something that's just a one-time thing. We want to look at something that's going to provide ongoing professional learning and support for our staff.
Yeah, just as our other pieces that you presented to us do. Okay, thank you. Ben?
Yes, I mentioned this the last board meeting, but I wanted to reiterate it because it's super important. So thank you, Dr. Thompson, and your staff, because it is evident that there is a lot of rigor expected in our students, and based on this presentation, we also expect rigor in our staff. And I have full confidence that once as this process is starting, once we get things in place, that we will be a model to be followed. We already are in several other areas in South Central Kansas and nationwide. But I'm confident that we've got the work behind us, that we're going to be the shining star in terms of equity and diversity for South Central Kansas. And so, thank you, staff. Appreciate it. I look forward to updates as we go along.
Okay. Mike?
Yeah, I've been sitting here listening, and we've talked about restorative issues and practices and those types of things, and we've talked about the student, we've talked about the staff, we've talked about teachers. The one thing that we seem to be leaving out in my mind, and I realize that everybody's not equal in this situation, but we're leaving out the home. Are we doing anything, like your story that you just talked about that you did today, the student and the AP, and it talks about building healthy relationships between staffs and students to students. It seems like we don't have any help from the home in a lot of these situations. And the other one that it shows up is under suicide awareness, where we're trying to recognize signs of suicide. Is that something that there's a plan or a thought, or I don't know how you do it, I'm not smart enough to know that, but it's something that, are we bringing the parents into the fold at some time to help with keeping their kids from going awry?
Yeah.
I would say that as we're looking at this multi-year plan that we're talking about, that is one of the considerations we have been talking about, that angle of the home or the community and reaching folks in that arena, and that parents and staff and students. And that adds to the complexity of the plan. And so it really isn't a plan that can be just developed very quickly at all. The more we meet and brainstorm, the more questions we come up with, the more we know we don't know, and we come up with more things to research. So, to answer your question, it is our intention to create a component that would address that side of things as well. And when we say a comprehensive plan, we like to think it's a pretty comprehensive plan that we're looking to develop.
That'd be fantastic, because it was never so much evident as Sunday as I watched the Chiefs-Jacksonville game about taking responsibility for your own actions when one of the players punched another one and they had to drag the man off the field because he wouldn't accept responsibility for his own actions after he was ejected from the game. And these are leaders in our community, and they're people that are looked up to. And I think that's some of the stuff that we're fighting in the schools, is they see this on TV, and they feel like it's important to them to emulate their heroes. And, that's why I asked that question, because it's, we need to get help, get responsibility from the parents. I would think that would be a big deal. I realize it's gonna be a very tough deal. I don't know how to tell you how to do that, but that's where that question comes from, because we don't accept responsibility for our own actions. And a lot of what you talked about today was teaching kids to accept responsibility for their own actions, and why those actions are costing us time and money. And they do. or we could be doing something else with that effort. It would be we could do a lot more things. Thank you for your work, appreciate it. I rambled there for a little bit.
Stan?
I was just gonna follow up on your concern or your question about home, Mike. Restorative practice fits into that perfectly, because there are times when there are discipline issues to be dealt with. Sometimes it is the parents that ask for the restorative hearing or the restorative practice. Sometimes when there is as they are working through the conflict, sometimes the parents are asked to come, the home is asked to come to the hearing, or hearing may not be the greatest phrase for that. but
Conference or-
Conference. So if you want to involve the home in this type of effort, then restorative practice does that perfectly. Because a lot of times you get to a stopping point when you're trying to find out why an action happened. It actually is something that may have happened in the home, and you have to bring the parents in as well. And the perfect ending of restorative practice is when everyone accepts responsibility, and then the person who was the a victim or on the wrong end of a conflict or a discipline problem accepts that they've accepted responsibility. So that's why Dr. Irving was absolutely correct. This is actually harder to do than to just suspend somebody for 5 days because they called somebody a name in the hallway. So if you're interested in getting parents involved, getting the home involved, you'd definitely be interested in restorative practice as well.
Well, and that's why I know it's a complicated deal, and what you're saying is exactly true. But I also know that we have children that are taking backpacks home from school and told, don't let your parents know about these backpacks because the parents will steal their food from their own kids. I mean,
And there are
and
times
there's-
when the parents, yes.
And I think that's important to say because people in our community don't realize what we're up against on a daily basis with our children. You know, they see Andover and they see Goddard, and that's nice and different. But, you know, that's why I said what I did was being tough to come up with a restorative practice outside of our schools with the parents, because there are honestly parents that don't care. And that's tough to do. I mean, I was lucky I had parents that care too much. And I paid the price for that, but I had some restorative practices. But, you know, that's one of the things that's why I asked that question, because I think it's gonna be tough to get it across the board, but I'd sure like to see it. That would be the ultimate goal.
And it's not really, restorative practice will never be across the board because restorative practice is also strictly voluntary. So kind of to go back to Ron's question as who initiates it, you may be in a school that only 2 teachers are into restorative practice. So obviously 2 teachers are not going to have a lot of chance to refer on every single problem that ever occurs in a school. Now, if you have a school that has a 100% buy-in and 100% of the teachers are involved, then there'll be a lot more referrals, and there'll be a lot more effort. But also, it will never be the Board of Education or Dr. Thompson or any principals going to a teacher or to a parent and saying, you must participate in restorative practice. It is all voluntary, but once it catches fire in a building, of which we've seen at West High and at Truesdale, once it takes place and once it builds up momentum, then it solves far more problems than just your typical traditional discipline approach.
Well, ladies, you've done a great job. We are on a road that I am glad that we're moving on. We've heard about guidelines. You've talked about some things that we needed to do with our computer systems and so on. Tonight, you talked about professional development and the pieces that we currently have in place and the pieces that we're looking at putting into place.
Yes.
And it just doesn't happen overnight. Because if it did, it wouldn't be right. We've got to do it right the
Exactly.
first time. And I think part of the wonderful things about the Wichita School District is our diversity, because our kids live in the world that they're going to grow up and work in.
Yeah.
So that's one of our strengths.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
So thank you very
Thank
much.
you.